wonderful to see so many of you, on the Zoom, and in the class. Okay, so we're gonna jump in straight back to where we left off last time. If you remember last time, we were looking at Rabbi Sacks's biography. We went through all of his, we kind of went through his the timeline of his life. Did I send you on the group the PDF of the presentation? Don't remember if I did or not. Either way, I'll send it to you, please God,
You did.
after the class. And one of the things, that we looked at was essentially the way in which a few technical things. If you're not speaking and if you know there's noise in your house, just make sure you're on mute. If there's definitely no noise in your house, that's fine to be not on mute, because obviously it's an interactive class, but it is, if people know that there's noise in their background, then just make sure you're on mute unless you want to speak. Okay. So what I would like to do, there's a few things I want to do in today's class. The first thing is we're going to finish very briefly. I'm going to begin with this, is we're going to jump back into the PowerPoint. I want us to very briefly just look at the last two slides where I bring in the idea of what novelty he brought specifically to philosophy, to Jewish philosophy. So I'm going to speak about that in a second. And then we're going to jump already straight into the book. Now, I know some of you haven't got the book yet, you haven't purchased it, you haven't read it. That's totally fine. This week, what we're going to do is we're going to just begin with a few overviews of the book. We're going to talk about the context, why it was written, the questions it addresses, what we should be looking at when we're reading it. Okay, how relevant is it today, exactly 2 decades after it was written? Why should it be relevant today? What are we going to learn from it? So that's really what we're going to aim to do today. We're going to also do it through a few discussions, but I want to begin with, I want to begin by finishing off the PowerPoint we looked at last week. And then actually we're going to take literally 5 minutes. I'd love, because now after this, I presume we're going to be, actually, you know what, we'll do this next week. I was going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, but we're going to do it next week once we have the permanent class. So we'll leave that for today. Okay, I'm just going to share. Oh, now it's gone because I went to the Matan website. 1 second. Hold on a minute. I want to share the PowerPoint.
Charger.
Okay, I got it. Let's do.
What was the name of the book? What was the name of the book?
The name of the book is there's 2 names, which we're also going to talk about today. It's either called Radical Then, Radical Now, or it's called A Letter in the Scroll. I'll talk about them both. The Radical Then, Radical Now was the way it was published, when it published in the UK, in United Kingdom. A Letter in the Scroll is how it was published in America. But that's the name of the book we're going to be doing. Okay, so if you remember last time, we spoke about the idea of this triangle in Rabbi Sacks's thought. It's going to be super important for us when we come back to the book. The idea of the freedom of the individual, covenant, and responsibility. And in some ways, all of them interconnect. You cannot have one without the other in Rabbi Sacks's thinking. There's no way to have freedom without responsibility. Freedom without responsibility essentially leads to radical individualism or radical collectivism, one or the other. And freedom without responsibility has led, according at least to Rabbi Sacks, to what we're seeing in many liberal democracies today, which is this sense of only negative liberty, only my rights rather than my responsibilities. The other third part of the triangle is the idea of covenant. In order to live responsibly, we have to create covenant. Covenant allows us to work towards a shared goal. Covenant is the way in which I create a relationship with someone as an equal, as a subject, as a partner. And that partnership allows me to take responsibility, because as an individual, it's very difficult for me to take responsibility on my own. If I want something to change in the world, I have to do it in partnership with other people. That's covenant. The reason why it's so important in terms of freedom of the individual is because what we do as free people is we give up certain rights. And in order to covenant with somebody else, we put certain boundaries on ourselves in order to covenant with somebody else. those boundaries that I put on myself as an individual allows me to be part of a collective, and being part of collecting brings meaning to the world. It allows me to achieve things I can't achieve on my own. So all the time we have this triangle, or I would even call it this kind of circle, this circular movement between these three different parts of Rabbi Sacks's thinking. I want to just for a second read with you two extracts about the intellectual legacy of Rabbi Sacks. So again, as we go through the year, what we're going to discover is that Rabbi Sacks's intellectual legacy touches on so many different areas of his thought. Okay, it touches on the Jewish element of his thought, how he, as a Jewish philosopher and as a parshan, okay, as someone who a literary interpreter of the literary texts of Judaism, how he brings something new to all of these areas. That's part of his intellectual legacy. Another part of his intellectual legacy is what he brings to the outside world. So one is within the purview of Judaism, kind of within the more kind of narrow purview of Judaism. The other is in the much wider, more universal realm of social philosophy. What does Rabbi Sacks bring to the table in terms of social philosophy? And there we're going to talk about big questions of how one creates a society when you have the rights and the needs of individuals, but you also have the goal of collective morality, the goal of a collective moral society. How does one navigate those two spaces? Okay. These are all things that Rabbi Sacks brought, but the most unbelievable thing, I think, okay, about Rabbi Sacks's vision was his ability to, in many ways, his ability to take the particular teachings of Judaism, particular teachings of the Bible, and to apply them to a much wider, much bigger application of society writ large. And the person who really saw this was two people. Number one, there's a book. By the way, just so you know, there's not that many things written in academic circles and actually generally about Rabbi Sacks. I can tell you, because I'm teaching a few of them, there are now people who are writing their doctorates on the thought of Rabbi Sacks. I know in Bar Ilan of a few people, and I know there's other places as well. There are books that are being published now, and that have been published, about Rabbi Sacks's thought. And on top of that, there is publications, certain journals and other things that are dedicating they're dedicating space and time to people who are writing about Rabbi Sacks's legacy. So in the academic, intellectual world, his thought is being taken in many ways more seriously than it had been until now. But before that, there were two primary books that were written about Rabbi Sacks. One was called Radical Responsibility. I actually have it here. Oh, second, it sounds a large pile of books. I was getting to. This is the book, Radical Responsibility. It's edited by Rabbi Michael Harris, Dr. Daniel Reinhold, and Dr. Tamra Wright. They published this, I think it was, I'm trying to think, that they published this on, I think it was at the end of Rabbi Sacks's term as chief rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. It was a Festschrift, and they basically, I'm just looking here what it says, they brought all different people who, who've been influenced by Rabbi Sacks. Some of them wrote about Rabbi Sacks's work, most of them didn't. But at the beginning, this is what they write. I'm going to share with you. They said, Jonathan Sacks's contribution to the intellectual discourse of Jewish thought is not only significant in its own right, but serves as an indicator for a future path for Jewish and non-Jewish theology. Okay, so already we see that they understand the way in which they perceive of Rabbi Sacks is that his thinking can be applied both to the Jewish world and to the non-Jewish world. Yet in the best traditions of Jewish thought, while being forward-looking, this contribution can also be seen as the latest incarnation of a concern that can be traced back to the very origins of Jewish philosophy. A narrative thread that connects the practitioners of Jewish philosophy throughout the ages is the tension that arose out of their relationship as Jews to the wider world about them. But perhaps the most important theme of his work for the world at large, the one that best embodies the message of Torah v'Chokhmah, is that the imperative today is to elucidate what faith means to those within the fold without losing hold of how that internal understanding of faith can affect those outside it. What are they saying here? Does anyone want to try and attempt to understand what they're saying? What was it about Rabbi Sachs that in some ways was emblematic of Jewish philosophy and the fields of Jewish philosophy from time immemorial, but also brought something new? Anyone want to try and navigate what they're saying?
Well, it's interesting. When he gives his talks on Parshat HaShavua, for example, he's always quoting different philosophers and historians that are not Jewish.
100%. Okay,
And
he's deeply influenced by them, yeah.
And I'm so impressed by that. It's mind-boggling to me because he's able to search it back to our sources. And, you know, the value system is so international, but it's buried. We have the Chokhmah, and he had the courage to apply it to the rest of the world. That's what I find so impressive.
I think, remind me of what your name is?
I'm new to the crowd, but I'm signing up for your class because I just think you're terrific. My name is Jerry Klein.
Jerry, okay.
Geraldine, but it's Jerry.
So how do you spell it?
It's Geraldine, really, but my nickname is
Geraldine.
Jerry.
Okay, but Jerry. Okay. So Jerry, firstly, I think it's really, really important what you've said here. And again, this is one of the things that we're going to really, really unpack and explore when we're talking about Rabbi Sachs over the next year. And when we're looking at his books and what we're going to see. And that is that there is something profound about Rabbi Sachs that is different in some ways to other thinkers. Now, why is that? There's plenty of thinkers, plenty of Jewish thinkers that bring in, they're bringing non-Jewish philosophy to their thinking, to their thought patterns. But what Rabbi Sachs does is there's a two-way movement. What he does is that on the one hand, he brings Jewish philosophy, he brings external philosophers, okay, secular philosophers, chokhmah, as he calls it. And by the way, one of the essays we're going to do together as part of our learning is going to be an essay that was in future tense. So some of you have already read it, but it's going to be very, very important for us as we go on, called the Essay on Torah and Chokhmah, way in which Rabbi Sachs understands the idea of secular knowledge and Jewish knowledge. What he does is unique, because he doesn't just draw secular knowledge and secular philosophy into Judaism, right, and use it as almost as a frame for understanding certain Jewish concepts. He also does the opposite. And I think, by the way, I don't know if any of you read or get Makor Rishon, but in this week's Makor Rishon, there was an article about Rabbi Sachs that was written by, this book is actually on my shelf, it's gone out my head. Rabbi Joshua Berman, sorry, went out my head. Written by Rabbi Joshua Berman, who in his own right is a brilliant, brilliant biblical scholar. And he said that what Rabbi Sachs had, by the way, if anyone wants it, I can upload it and I can take a picture and put it on the group. If your Hebrew's all good enough, I really highly recommend reading it. He says what was unique about Rabbi Sachs wasn't just the way that he brought secular philosophy into Judaism and tried exactly to do what Jewish philosophy has done over the many centuries, which is to kind of exactly what they say here, right? To kind of navigate that path between secular knowledge and Jewish knowledge. But Rabbi Sachs did something even more than that. He took Jewish particular teachings, the teachings of the Torah and the Bible, and Jewish particular ways of looking at the world, and he used them as a segue into understanding secular dilemmas and challenges and sociological thinking and philosophy. So he didn't just bring something in from the outside into Judaism, he brought the particularity of Judaism to the outside world. And that is unique. In fact, Rabbi Joshua Berman says he cannot think of one other philosopher that does that over the course of our history. He says the closest that you get to that, I guess, that journey is, or that paradigm is the Nevi'im, the prophets of Israel who prophesied to non-Jewish to the non-Jewish world. Okay, he says that's the closest you get in our history. And what he says is like very powerful. He says Rabbi Sachs had that ability that many other people didn't. Now, why does he have that ability? Number one, because, and we're going to talk about this, because he has a very strong footing in both worlds. He has a footing in Judaism, and he has a very strong footing in Judaism and Jewish ideas and biblical ideas. And he has a very, very strong footing in secular philosophy and secular wisdom. And therefore, he is able to navigate a unique, radically new path between these two worlds, okay? To bring one to the other in both directions. That's the first reason. The second reason is because of his placement. As the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Rabbi Sachs, I'm so sorry, there's something wrong with my lights. Let me just turn the main light on. 1 second. Rabbi Sachs was well placed to, for example, teach Jewish concepts and ideas to that non-Jewish outside world. He met with all very big religious leaders. He met with prime ministers. He met with kings. He was a frequent person interviewed for BBC Thought of the Day. Many other things that he did allowed him to have that placement and to teach particularly Jewish wisdom to the outside world. So for many different reasons, this is what he does. I'm going to continue. However, this is expressly not to be carried out through reduction of faith to a form of meaningless universalism. Okay, what do they say here? They say it isn't just that he takes Judaism and universalizes it, and then it just becomes a generic form of religion or even a generic form of wisdom. No, it's to be done in a manner that is proudly particularistic. I think that's such a brilliant phraseology, because that's who Rabbi Sachs was. He was someone who was proudly particularistic, okay? And yet able to engage the world around it and contribute to its rebuilding in an age where many would have us believe that religious faith is the cause of its destruction. His work challenged religious thinkers to chart a new direction for religious thought that works towards a form of universalism in which they can simultaneously remain proud of the particularity of their Torah, right? And proud of the Chokhmah, which is the secular wisdom. Torah for Jonathan Sachs represents the particularistic, inherited teachings of Judaism, while Chokhmah, wisdom, refers to the universal realm of the sciences and the humanities. Okay, so he had a very specific vision of what Judaism was meant to bring and to do in the world. Another brilliant book that was written kind of put together in 2014 is by someone called I didn't put her name here. That's really bad. It's by, 1 second, I'll tell you exactly who. Chava Tirosh Samuelson, that's who edited it. She did a whole series of books. She has a whole series of books on different Jewish thinkers. She begins the books by interviewing the thinkers and writing about them and kind of giving an overview. And then she brings in excerpts from their thinking that represent their thoughts. So she does this for Rabbi Sachs in 2014. And I want to share with you what she says, because I think she intuitively if we think about this, was edited in 2014, so it was a decade ago, but she intuited the greatness of who he was, and listen to how she describes his thinking. Far from offering an insular philosophy of the tradition, Sachs conceives of Judaism as the intersection of the universal and particular. Okay, listen. It's such an important sentence in understanding Rabbi Sachs. Now, again, those of you that have been learning with me for the last year, already understand this about Rabbi Sachs, because as soon as you read any of his books, you intuit already that there is this kind of intersection between the universal and the particular. Okay, although he speaks to Judaism in all of its particularity, he is still able to articulate how this tradition is nevertheless able to speak to humanity in all of its universality. So listen for a second. Okay? He speaks to Jews in their particularity, but he speaks to non-Jews through the particularity of Judaism on a universal level. Now, I want to be clear, the book we're about to do, and I'm going to talk about it in a second, Radical Then, Radical Now, or Letter and Scroll, the book we're about to do is meant for Jews. Okay, we've read until now other books of Rabbi Sachs. We read, for example, The Great Partnership. That was for sure meant for non-Jews as much as for Jews. And it spoke in universal idioms. It spoke in universal language. It spoke in more generic terms. It brought something very specific to the table and something very particular to Judaism. But the phraseology, the way it spoke, its audience was obviously non-Jewish. In this book that we're about to look at, you're going to see this is really a manifesto for Jews. I'm going to talk about it in a second. Let me just continue. Although his is a Judaism that does not exist alone. Hold on, I'm going to come 1 second. It does not exist alone, but becomes a partner with God and other religions in a never-ending struggle for human dignity and social justice. Golda.
What is this woman's name? I didn't catch it. I love your accent, but it's
Hava, I'll write it in the chat. I'll stop share so we can hear Golda's question. And as she's asking, I'm just going to write it in the chat. Yeah, Golda, go ahead.
I think that the line between audience for Jews and non-Jews is really blurred in this world of Jews that don't even know why they're particular. So, I don't even know how to redefine particularism versus universalism along the line of Jew, non-Jew, because I think there are so many Jews who fall into the universalism, who would understand it on that level because they don't understand their particular role here.
Okay, so I think that did we? I'm sorry, I like teach so many groups here. Did we do To Heal a Fractured World, Golda?
Yes, last year.
You did. Okay, so one of the things that we looked at in To Heal a Fractured World, if you remember, was this. In many ways, the book itself was Rabbi Sacks's polemic against Jews who saw this universal mission of Tikkun Olam as the only thing that guides Judaism. And Rabbi Sachs basically turns around in that book and says, no, you got it all wrong. Judaism is far more than just the universal message of social justice and Tikkun Olam. Judaism is about a particular law. It's about a particular people with a particular law, with a particular mission from God. And our job is to tap in. This is what we're going to see. This is why this book, for me at this time, at this moment, is so important. Because in this book, Rabbi Sachs says, if you do not understand what your Judaism is, the particularity of what your Judaism is and what it has and what it offers you, you cannot go out into the world and bring the message of Judaism because you don't know what you're bringing to the world. So Rabbi Sachs here, I'm saying, he would say that he would come out against John Lennon, imagine all the people, no religions, no lines, no boundaries, no countries, no, says Rabbi Sachs, that is not what the world is about. You will not have peace when there's nothing of nothing, because then we really, as John Lennon says, we have nothing to live or die for. There's no meaning in the world, there's nothing to bring to the world. We don't have anything that defines us and makes us different. We don't have anything to teach anybody. We don't have anything that makes living rich with everything that comes with it. Okay, it's just this kind of generic gray. And that, Rabbi Sachs says, is not the point of our existence in the world. The point of our existence in the world is that each and every culture, each and every religion, each and every country, each and every person has something particular to bring to the world and to teach others and to learn from others. And if we do not know what we bring, then we have nothing to teach. Okay, so he was very specific about that fact. Now, he, in some ways, I believe that with time, he saw himself as the shagrir, as the how do you say it in English? The
Representative.
the
Ambassador.
ambassador. He saw himself as an ambassador of Judaism to the world. He understood that Judaism has very, very specific messages that it's come to teach the world, and that Rabbi Sacks saw himself as the voice of those messages. So, Golda, the answer really is that you have to tap into what it means to be a Jew before you can go and say, I'm an ambassador for Tikkun Olam in the world. And that's what this book does, okay?
So my point was that he hits the Jew, he addressed what's his uniqueness is that he's able to tap into Jews that are already there, Jews that are not there, and also the greater world. So
yeah, 100% agree with you, 100%. And the reason he can do that is precisely the reason what we're talking about. So he said, so she continues and she says, following the lead of the great medieval philosophers, most notably Maimonides, Sacks contends that one cannot apply the Torah to the world unless one first understands the world. Okay, and this again, the saying, the kind of, I don't know how you would call it, the not the logo, but the mission of his chief rabbinate's kind of mission statement was what was called Judaism engaged with the world. That was the mission statement. And that is so Sacksian because Rabbi Sacks says you can't bring something to the world if you don't understand the world itself. Okay, in order to address the world and not hide from it, Judaism must reunite Torah and wisdom, the two interconnected strands of its existence. Only when these two features are reunited can Jews make the world a better place and thereby take up their place as a light unto the nations. In one of his least Jewish books, The Politics of Hope, Sacks further explores the importance of community and the social contract. Therein, he juxtaposes liberalism with libertarianism. And we're going to come to this. The latter, libertarianism, has created the cult of the individual and in the process eroded a sense of the common good. Instead, it has created a severe mistrust of social order and an erosion in institutions, the family, the faith community, the government that have traditionally sustained this order. The former, on the contrary, envisages a civil society based on the realm of the public good. Sacks contends that it isn't only as husbands and wives, parents and friends and citizens, not consumers, that we can make a positive difference to those around us, thereby creating a common good regardless of religion, ethnicity, or other matters that divide us. Okay, we're going to come back to this a bit later on, but it's really important to understand that for Rabbi Sacks, we're constantly having to oscillate between universal concerns, common good, trying to tap in to something bigger than ourselves. And at the same time, the particularity of who we are and where we are and what we're called upon to do. Okay, the books that we're going to be reading starting now is Radical Then, Radical Now, or A Letter in the Scroll. I'm going to explain the two names in a minute. One People. Okay, One People has just been republished. I'm just seeing if I've got my copy here. Somewhere in. Okay, so One People you can get on the Koran website. Morality for sure you can also get ordered online, and Future Tense. Now, Future Tense, I may swap the order around. I haven't decided yet. We may do Future Tense after Radical Then, Radical Now, which I think we might. We might do Radical Then, Radical Now, Future Tense, Morality, and then One People. Okay, so that may be the order, but I'll let you know as we go on. Okay, so
we'll really get through them all.
Yes, the aim is to get through all four of them. That's why I'm going to leave One People to the end, because I feel like the Radical Then, Radical Now, Future Tense, and Morality are, I would say, like the more important books at the moment. One People, I think, is really powerful, but it's one of his much earlier books. And therefore, number one, for two reasons, I'm leaving it to the end, I think. Number one, because I think it's less accessible to the layperson, that's why I want to leave it to the end, because I think by that point, you're going to have a much greater grip on Rabbi Sacks, and therefore it might be easier to get into a slightly more difficult book to read. And number two, because it's it's really, really important. I think it's really important for us today more than ever because he really speaks about this idea. But it's actually dealing with the idea of peoplehood, but it's dealing with it from the perspective of kind of more like sectarian concerns, reform, conservative, etc., which today perhaps is less compelling than it was when it was written in the 1990s. Still grapples with really important things, which is why if we do it at the end and we don't have as much time as we do for the other books, I'm going to point you towards specific chapters. So that's why I'm going to leave it specifically, I think, till the end. Okay, right. Let's do as follows. I'm going to open up, generally speaking, I think we're going to try probably once every 2 weeks, we're going to split into breakout rooms. We're not going to do it today, again, because we're just beginning, but from next week, we will, where you're going to be in breakout rooms. And what I'm going to do is, and this is also a way of people kind of meeting each other, is I'm going to randomly put you into breakout rooms, and each breakout room will have certain things they need, certain extracts they need to discuss and various things, then we'll come back together. It will only be for 10, 15 minutes maximum, not for the whole class, of course, but that we've done it in the past and it's worked really nicely. Today I'm gonna actually just open up with a few questions. I think the best way to do it is because we're definitely much more than usual than we were last year, and I can't even see all of you, which is a little bit of a shame. But I keep going between both screens. I'm gonna ask people simply to just raise their hand. If you look at the bottom, you've got a react. Okay, a react screen. On the react button, it says raise hand. You can see I've raised my hand. Everyone see it? Okay, so where it says raise hand, you press raise hand. When you finish, you lower hand. Okay, if you raise your hand, then I'll be able to see that you've got something to say, and then I can call on you. Okay, so I want to begin like this. We're talking here about Rabbi Sacks's book, Radical Then, Radical Now, and I don't know how many of you have maybe started it or have looked at it or have kind of started reading it. A few nods. Okay, excellent. But I want us to first and foremost contextualize the book. Okay, and I want us to begin before we even contextualize the book, before we even talk about what's in the book and the agenda and perhaps maybe even the polemic of the book. I want us to think about some very basic questions for us today, which I sent you on the thing. One, first and foremost, is what do you perceive to be the greatest challenge for Judaism today? If I was to throw out, what is the greatest challenge for us today? What do you think it would be? And again, you can be, I'm just getting another light because I can see I'm very, very dark here. So just think about it for a second. Okay, and then those of you that want to respond, raise your hand. Okay, Chaya, you're first. Off you go. Chaya? Chaya, you need to unmute. Chaya? Okay, Debbie, let's start with you. Oh, Chaya, okay, go ahead. Debbie will go to you after.
I'm sorry, I'm in a hotel lobby. I'm working off my tablet, so I'm doing the best I can. I think after reading the first few chapters and the introduction of Rabbi Sacks' letter in the scroll, I think it's getting people to, or especially young people today, the awareness of what it is to be a Jew, and to possibly get out of that mindset that Tikkun Olam is what it's all about.
Okay, hold on.
Rabbi
Before we get into the book, wait, Chaya, I'm stopping you. I don't want to, for the minute, talk about Rabbi Sacks's book. My question is, what do you think today, not when he wrote it in 2020, what is today the biggest challenge for a Jew?
Jewish identity.
Jewish identity. Okay, why do you say that?
I see so many people, I'm born a Jew, but I'm not really Jewish. I hear that over and over, especially from young people, and I don't feel that it talks to me, connect to me. I understand Torah. The laws aren't meaningful. They're not up to date. They're ancient. What is Torah? Does it apply to me? So I think Jewish identity. What is Jew? I've had discussions that I'm lost and.
Okay, so I'm hearing two things from you. I'm hearing Jewish identity, why am I Jew? Why should I choose to be a Jew? And I'm hearing not just Jewish identity, but actually maybe a more complicated question. Why should I commit myself to archaic laws? Okay, why should these archaic laws, or kind of a challenge to orthodoxy maybe, why should these be relevant to me? Okay, Debbie.
I would say unity. I just think that we're a very fractured people from start to finish, and we have always been it. But I think it's more critical today. I think we need to be more unified and more embracing.
Beautiful. Okay, so Deb, so I'm gonna just type a few of these ideas onto the board that we're gonna use. 1 second. Okay, so we've spoken about the question of Jewish identity. Okay, the question of commitment to halakha. Okay, and what Debbie said, which I think I totally concur with, and that is the idea of Jewish unity. Okay, or Jewish unity or Jewish peoplehood, how do we overcome the fissures in society, okay, here in Israel and maybe even in the diaspora as well. Shauna.
Hi. I think that there's a disappointment in our Judaism now. How can we feel positive about Judaism?
Okay, so a despondency, which is born of what? Yeah, which is born of what?
You're speaking to me. I mean, right now the situation.
Okay.
There's so much out there that's saying that we're bad, we're the bad guys, and we don't know how to work our way around it. Can't figure it out. Because they don't have the education or the positive feeling about themselves as Jews.
I think something, that's why.
Beautiful. Okay. Jerry.
I was going to say unity, because to me, but it goes back to Jewish identity, because if you don't know who you are, how can you have unity? So it's really tied between the two. It's easy to say unity, but if you don't know who you are, you don't identify as a Jew. And the other thing is the emphasis on halacha and on the hukim and on the things you don't do. You have to keep kosher. You have to do, the secular world, the secular Jew focuses on those things. I think Rabbi Sachs and the idea of the philosophy of Rabbi Sachs will get Jews more to be Jewish, because they'll see the relevance of it in the secular world.
Okay, so I'm going to put here, I think this is a very this is with an A, isn't it? The very idea of what is Jewish unity, okay? No, let's put it like this. Is Judaism still relevant? Okay, that I think that's like one of the biggest questions that we are facing today. And that is something that Rabbi Sachs addressed. Marcy.
Hello. Years ago, there was a group of books called the Jewish Catalog. And I remember giving them as bar mitzvah gifts for people who had not had the education, who had not been out. It was almost a how-to do. And so to tie in, I think the education aspect of why this is versus that this is what my mother did or what my grandmother did or that, so that as Rabbi Sachs would talk about putting the book in the library and taking it out with your name, but why that book is there and why you're part of that.
Okay, so that goes again back to the relevancy, Jewish education. Gloria.
No, it's okay.
You say it. That's okay.
Yeah,
we're sitting here together. I'm sitting here together with
together.
Shoshana Stern.
I think one of the greatest challenges today is assimilation. Assimilation, probably the foundation is also education. many generations, let's assume I'm just throwing a country here, America, many generations have lived in the United States, and along the way, they kind of lost the connection to Judaism vis-a-vis, for example, in Canada, we're much closer to the European kind of thing. There is somewhat less assimilation. So I think that education and the home is a very, very big conduit to how you're going to be, if you're going to continue your Judaism.
100%. So assimilation, I think, is very, very important. I've lost the whiteboard. Okay, never mind. Assimilation, which is connected to education, which is connected to Jewish identity, which is connected to Jewish unity. Okay, so we've got all of these. I'm just going to take one more. Joanna and Esther. I think those are the two that haven't spoken yet.
I was only going to say, wait a moment, I'm not mute. You can hear me?
Yeah.
That something more external has a great influence, probably, is the anti-Semitism and all the fake news and all the horrible things going on in the public dominion, in the media and so on, which I think is a great challenge, particularly to young people.
I think that connects to everything we've said, but I think in some senses that's a trigger, maybe even a symptom, okay, that you have this kind of post-identity plethora of choices, not being able to process information in the right way, and being enticed to a narrative that isn't your own. And I think all of those things have a lot to say. And they also, one of the words that people haven't brought up here, but it connects to Jewish unity, is really the idea of polarization. There's been polarization generally in the world, specifically in Judaism, we've seen here in Israel. Okay, we're going to, in 1 second, I'm going to come back because I want to just think about all the things we've said, and I want to actually class them into the diaspora and Israel, because I think the challenges are different in either place.
Just add, I think a lot of young people are afraid to stand up and say what they want to say. I know the university students, if they've got very anti-Jewish lecturers, they don't feel that they're able to express themselves.
100%. And then again, this goes back to the question, what's at the root of that? That's a cause. What's the symptom? What is the symptom of the fact that Jews in university don't feel that they can express their Judaism? And I think that part of it is the inability to construct a convincing and compelling Jewish narrative, Jewish identity, Jewish pride. Okay, if you are not being compelled by your identity and your pride and your Judaism, how can you show it to others? How can you wear it as a badge of honor? And we're going to talk all of these questions of things that were surprisingly, because it was written 2 decades ago, but all of these questions, things that Rabbi Sachs addressed. Esther, and then I want to wrap up this conversation, and I'm going to show you something. Esther.
I was going to say what you just said, basically, that the problem is that we have not presented a positive picture of Judaism, that there is not a compelling picture of Judaism, of Jews and Judaism out there, and so folks are not interested in it.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we've all agreed that there's, if I was going to summarize it, I'd say there's 4 main challenges, 2 in Israel, 2 in Chutz La'aretz. In the diaspora, the challenge, I think the central challenges are the idea of choosing to be a Jew. Why should I choose to be Jewish? Okay, which obviously is tied up to the challenge of assimilation. Okay, why should I be Jewish? Why should I wear Judaism with pride? What is my Jewish story? What is my Jewish identity? And therefore, if I can't answer that in the affirmative, I will assimilate. Okay, that there will be much more of a danger of assimilation. That's like kind of, I would say, the greatest challenge in the diaspora. By the way, that was exactly the challenge that Rabbi Sachs was addressing. I don't think much has changed. Okay. I was going to ask the next question but I'm just going to tie it in myself, has anything post October the 7th changed so much? So I think that really the challenges actually are probably the same, just far more immediate and far more dangerous. Okay. One thing that has changed in October the 7th, and I think this is the reason why this book is so important for now, is that many Jews, something happened on October the 7th, exactly the same way that something happened to many Jews around the world following the Six-Day War, one of which was Rabbi Sacks. And that is for Jews, in both a negative or a positive way, whichever way you want to look at it, suddenly begin to ask themselves questions, okay? They suddenly find that they are being compelled almost, okay, to question their identity, to go back to the roots of why am I Jewish? Whether it's because they feel, well, they're targeting me as a Jew, I don't actually particularly find, my Judaism has just kind of been a periphery part of my identity until this moment. But now that other people are pointing the finger and saying, Jew, maybe I should look at myself and ask, what is my Judaism? Okay, so that's what's happening in the diaspora. In Israel, one of the greatest challenges is the challenge of Jewish unity, is the challenge of polarization, is the challenge of fissures within society, and ultimately, right, how do we create a society made up of all different parts, all different sectors, all different expressions of Judaism? But I also think the challenge here, and it goes back to the challenge that Rabbi Sacks addressed decades ago, and that is the challenge of apathy. If I would say in the religious community, there's kind of an apathy. Okay, I'm religious, but even within the youth, maybe the challenge that a few of you mentioned, right? Why should I keep halakha? Why is it so important? Why is my particular religion so important to me? Even for those, by the way, many Jews who are religious, they don't feel that there's a compelling reason to be religious, okay? Even if they continue it as a way of life. The other challenge on the totally kind of maybe the other side of the coin is, I would say, ignorance. Okay, for many secular people, and I'm sure many of you have come across many secular people in your life, you will find that if you speak to them, many of them, not all of them, but many of them have zero knowledge of Judaism, of what Judaism is. If you ask them what the Talmud is, many of them won't even be able to tell you what the Gemara is. If you ask them, that their most basic knowledge will be the Chagim, because it's part of the cyclical year in Israel, but really much more than that, they don't know. And there is ignorance, and that ignorance leads to a kind of apathy, a kind of ambivalence. And today, post October the 7th, that challenge once again is even greater, because you have people who are having to fight for the survival of their nation, and they have returned, they have come, they are fighting on the front lines. Many of them are asking the question, why? What is it? Why should I stay in Israel? Why should I not go to Cyprus and make a life for myself there? Why should I stay and be part of my people's story? So these challenges, which, by the way, were the challenges, apathy, assimilation, ambivalence, those were the challenges that Rabbi Sacks addressed or was addressing when he wrote this book 20 years ago. Unfortunately, yes, the challenges they may be worded differently, they may be contextualized in a different way, but those 3 A's, ambivalence, apathy, assimilation, the 3 A's are still the challenges that we are facing today. So in some senses, what I'm saying or what I'm asking is, why? Why is it that 20 years on, those are still the challenges? And Rabbi Sacks addresses those in this book. That's what he does in this book. Okay, now I want us to kind of unpack a little bit. By the way, I think they're questions we can ask ourselves as well. I always say, the fact that all of you are here on this Zoom and are learning at Matan, it already tells me something about you, okay? It tells me that the people I'm speaking to are engaged. They're engaged with their Judaism. It doesn't tell me what form of Judaism you align with, okay? Everyone makes those choices, but it definitely tells me you're engaged, or you're searching, or you're asking questions, or you want to learn more, okay? But it tells me that you're already engaged. So even more so, if you're engaged and if you're asking, then we should be asking ourselves the same question. And I have to tell you, post October the 7th, I had many, many questions, and I consider myself Orthodox Jew. I consider myself well-read, well-educated. I consider myself as someone who's constantly asking myself questions. And once again, on October the 7th, I felt as if the ground had been pulled from under my feet, and so many assumptions that I had aligned with until that moment, I questioned, and I'm still questioning. So I think part of the process of growth, part of the process of being a Jew, is to constantly be asking questions, constantly be addressing challenges to ourselves. I want to now talk about this book. What is going on in this book? What is happening? What is Rabbi Sacks, what's going on at the time? So it's the turn of the millennium. It's the year 2000. That's the year the book is published. It's actually published it's published kind of, or he says at least, it's a present for his son who gets married. Okay, so again, in Rabbi Sacks's life, he feels that this is, his son's getting married. He's the first of his children to marry, and he's continuing this kind of letter in the scroll, this continuum of Jewish continuity, and he feels that he wants to give his son a gift, and the gift is this book. But he also dedicates the book to his father. I'm just reading, he says, to the memory of my late father, Louis David Sacks, and to our son Joshua and daughter-in-law Eve, our continuity. And so in some senses, this book, even the dedication of this book, is in some ways a test to this continuum, this Jewish continuum of the past and of the future. The year 2000, okay, it's the year where in some senses we're moving from modernity to post-modernity. Post-modernity already existed, but now we're really feeling it on a much higher level. The other thing that Rabbi Sacks is very important to know about this book is that it's the only book of Rabbi Sacks that has two names. There's this one, which is called Radical Then, Radical Now. Okay, that was published, the title Radical Then, Radical Now was published in the UK. The title of the book that was published in America is A Letter in the Scroll. I've heard many people say many different reasons why it's got two names. All of the people I've spoken to are people who have spoken to Rabbi Sacks or worked with Rabbi Sacks. One of them said because it was originally published in England and as Radical Then, Radical Now. And I'll explain why I think that is a very important title in a second. But when they came to publish it in America, the term radical in America has different connotations to the way it does in England, and therefore they called it after one of the chapters in the book, A Letter in the Scroll. Someone else told me, no, it was originally published, I had to find this out, but it was originally published in America as A Letter in the Scroll. Why? Because American Jews understood what it was. What was it? Hold on a minute. I should remember now what. Tell you what they said. I'm just looking back now because I made a note. It said the reason why in America it was called A Letter in the Scroll is because Jews that's why. Because in America, Jews read Rabbi Sacks's book and they understood what it means to be a letter in the scroll. They understood what a scroll was in terms of a Sefer Torah. But because in England, non-Jews read Rabbi Sacks's book, the letter in the scroll didn't have the same connotations for the non-Jews in America, and therefore they called it instead Radical Then, Radical Now. I don't know the real reason, but I can tell you that both titles represent different messages. The letter in the scroll represents the message that without each of us as individuals, the scroll isn't complete, right? But without the scroll, our meaning as individuals isn't complete. We need to, and again, what is the book really telling us? The book is telling us about this intersection between individuality and the collective, okay, between the individual and the collective. And what is Judaism if not the story, if not the narrative of how we function as individuals within a collective? Okay, so that's like the letter in the scroll. Radical Then, Radical Now. I personally think that was the original title because Rabbi Sacks saw himself, and I really am convinced about this. Rabbi Sacks had a very strong affinity towards the person who, and you'll see in a few interviews he speaks about him, the person who wrote Hamilton, the musical, Lin-Miranda Manuel. And one of the reasons why he really admired him, and by the way, he also admired other people who were super creative, like, can't remember what his name is, the person that did Toy Story and Pixar. He admired creativity, but specifically Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he loved Hamilton. Why? Hamilton was essentially, he was a periphery character in the story of the founding fathers of America. That was until it became a Broadway musical, okay? And why was he a periphery story? Because he just wasn't spoken about all that much, okay? You'll know other founding fathers, but not necessarily him. And what Rabbi Sachs loved about what Lin-Manuel Miranda did is that he took a periphery story, a story that really had lost its relevancy, that wasn't particularly exciting or engaging, and he brought it to life. He brought it to life by making it relevant. Okay, if you look at the Hamilton is black, okay, and all the music is modern and rap, and he basically took something that was on the shoreline, was on the periphery, and he brought it to the fore. And he did it through creative genius, basically. I really believe this is my take on it, my interpretation. He never writes this anywhere, Rabbi Sachs. But after reading basically everything he's written and listening to most of the things he said, I really believe that in some ways that's what Rabbi Sachs was trying to do for Judaism. Rabbi Sachs understood, and again, go back to the 3 A's, ambivalence, apathy, assimilation. Rabbi Sachs understood that those were the 3 greatest challenges we faced in the 21st century. And how do we curb the trend? How do we beat the trend of assimilation, the trend of apathy, the trend of ambivalence? How do we do that? We do it through creating an engaging Judaism. We do it by showing the youth of today that there is a reason to align themselves with the Jewish story, that there is a reason to become halachic Jews, that there is a reason to be to choose Jewish identity, not just to have Jewish identity choose us, but for us to choose Jewish identity. And Rabbi Sachs did that in his writing. And the book, I believe, he sets out that manifesto the best and in the most concise and convincing way is Radical Then, Radical Now. Rabbi Sachs says in the title, Radical Then, Radical Now, is that Judaism is a radical religion. This is not, and again, the whole book is a polemic against Marx. You'll see it at the beginning because he mentions him. This is not about religion as an opium of the masses. This is not about religion that says, oh, I'm going to give you comfort and everything's going to be okay. And you just have to keep the status quo. This is not about religion that says, yeah, we're a bit archaic, but we're keeping tradition. And that's the most important thing. No, Rabbi Sachs says that in the time of the Bible, Judaism brought something radical to the world, something new, a revolution in the way we think and the way we worship. And today, says Rabbi Sachs, we are no different. Today, Jews bring something new to the world. And we have to show the relevancy of Judaism today. And that was, I believe, that was Rabbi Sachs's life mission. His life mission was to show us that Judaism is still, not only is still relevant, but still has something to teach the world. And that's what he did. And that's where we have this intersection between the particular and the universal. If we understand what the particular message of Judaism, if we understand how radical it is, if we understand that we're letters in the scroll and we have a role to play, then we will be able to take the particularity, the richness, the beauty, the novelty, the creativity of what Judaism brings to the world and shine it outwards to the world. And that was what Rabbi Sachs aimed to do, and I believe what he did do. So now we're going to go into the book itself, and we're going to try and understand from the book, and I'm going to do that just by sharing the sheets that I bought for you. Second. Okay. So you can see here, okay. So what is the agenda of the book? So this, by the way, comes from the preface. If you were those of you that read the preface already, you'll see that it's very short. And there in the preface, he has these 2 things that I want to read with you. Okay, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to ask you what you think. Okay, so listen carefully. Why this strange contrast between what non-Jews and Jews have to say about them? Okay, so no, sorry, that's from the prologue. Sorry. So at the heart of the story I have to tell is my own theology of Judaism, something I have never previously written. He frames the book. What's the aim of the book? What's the agenda, Rabbi Sachs's agenda in the book? His aim of the book is to set out his Jewish theology, what he believes Judaism has come to teach the world about God, okay, and about religion. The second very important sentence, I think, is, and specifically for us in this moment, crisis is creative. I'll repeat that. Crisis is creative. It allows us, as more settled times do not, to encounter an ancient heritage afresh. And here I go back to what we spoke about when I asked you all, what do you think the challenge today is in a post-710 world? And many of you said that Jews today somehow understand that they can't hide from their Judaism anymore, but they're not sure where to take it. Rabbi Sachs says that this is a time of crisis. In a time of crisis, we are suddenly met with challenges, with questions about our identity, about who we are, that maybe perhaps we've never thought about before. But it's also a time where we can't anymore give into apathy. We can't anymore give into ambivalence. We have to take a stand. And then the question is, how do we do that? Now, just to read you from his prologue about the challenge. Now, those of you, again, if you read the prologue, in fact, maybe I'll ask one of you just for a second, those of you that have read it, to very, very briefly summarize what he asks his students to do. He talks about the idea that a group of university students came to see him. They were planning a course for the next year, and they wanted him to suggest a theme. He thought for a minute and said, that there's so many Jews doing so many different interesting things, right? And why don't you write to these Jews and ask them what being a Jew means to them? Does someone want to very briefly summarize what happened when those students did what they did? Anyone read it?
Nicht.
What was that?
That was Yiddish. Nicht mit nicht.
Exactly.
He hardly got a response, and the few that did respond said things like, "Oh, but my Jewishness has never meant a thing to me." It was horrifying, but totally predictable.
Totally predictable. Okay, Michelle, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say that there was more sources, more written by non-Jews, more than by Jews.
Exactly, more positive things written about Jews than non-Jews. The Jews said things like, and again, you'll go and read it in your own time, but the Jews said things, Jewishness is a source of comfort and reassurance, gives me a sense of belonging, okay? But I have no doubt I would have felt the same had I been brought up Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Buddhist, or Hottentot, okay? Another one, and that was one of the good ones, okay? Another one said, they described it as an illness. It's a hereditary illness, okay? And you laugh, but yeah.
Oh, I'm in shock. I'm not laughing. Oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And by the way, so I have heard Jews say that, okay, unfortunately. Another one said, what's the other thing he says? He says the question, why be Jewish, is something I can't answer any more than why be alive or why be two-legged. It's just part of something I was born into, and it doesn't mean anything to me, okay? So he said, so then Rabbi Sachs says, what did I ask them to do? I asked them to listen. I read to them some non-Jewish voices who speak about Judaism. He brings in Leo Tolstoy. He brings in the American President John Adams. He brings in the historian Paul Johnson, and he brings in the former editor of the Times, William Rees-Mogg. And every single one of them has something positive, very positive to say about Judaism. For example, what does Leo Tolstoy say? He says the Jew is that sacred being who is brought down from heaven, the everlasting fire, and illuminated it in the entire world. What does John Adams say? He would say, if I was an atheist and believed in blind eternal fate, I shall still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing the nations, okay? What does Paul Johnson say? Paul Johnson says the Jews had this gift. To them, we owe the idea of equality before the law, both divine and human, of sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person, of the individual conscience, and so of personal redemption, the collective conscience, and so of social responsibility, of peace as an abstract ideal, and love as the foundation of justice, etc., etc. And William Rees-Mogg, one of the gifts of the Jewish culture to Christianity is that it has taught Christians to think like Jews. And any modern man who has not learned to think as though he were a Jew can hardly be said to have learned to think at all. Okay? And all of a sudden, what does Rabbi Sachs say? What does he turn around? He turns around and he says, it made me realize that Jews can possess this kind of ambivalence towards Judaism. Listen to how he describes it. He says, why would this strange contrast between what non-Jews and Jews have to say about them? Why was it that whilst non-Jews saw in Jews and Judaism something extraordinary, Jews themselves went to such elaborate lengths to deny it, to claim the virtue of being ordinary, as if it were a rare and special achievement? This much was clear to me. If there is confusion and demoralization at the heart of this much was clear to me, that there is confusion and demoralization at the heart of contemporary Jewish identity. And another thing he says, I discovered how hard it had become for Jews to say why they are Jews, and why, if they do, they want the Jewish story to continue. This is what started me on a journey to self-discovery. Okay, so again, what Rabbi Sachs says here is that when we look at what Jews and non-Jews say about religion, there is such a great dissonance. And then the question is why? Why are Jews so ambivalent about their Judaism, and how can we remedy that situation, Jerry?
What comes to my mind right now is the idea of the chosen. When we consider ourselves as the chosen people, it was not...
I'm hearing massive booms where I am. Hold on. But I haven't had another car. Okay. Tov. Oh my God, and another one. Whoa. Okay, Tov, sorry, Jerry, carry on.
No, I was just thinking about the concept of the chosen. We were chosen to bring a certain kind of morality, monotheism, morality, rules, society, values, responsibility, all the things to the world. But it's been misinterpreted as it's considered racist if we consider ourselves. So I think the secular Jew, or even the non-religious Jew, but who feels Jewish, cardiac Jew, who feels it in the heart, but not necessarily anywhere else, that aspect they want to ignore or diminish it because they don't want to be considered arrogant. So there is a like almost ashamed because they want to feel like part of everyone else.
So, okay, so there's always been a aspiration, I would say a Jewish aspiration, to be normal, to just be like everybody else. Okay, and I think you're right. I think it's true. But the truth is that no one, I'm really sorry. Just can you give me 1 second? My daughter was, 1 second, sorry, just 1 second. I just want to check she's okay. You okay?
I'm in Radana.
You okay?
I just lay down on the road.
There was another car?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah, I just don't know what to do now.
That's right. She had an accident, maybe. Look how cool she is. Last year, in last year's class, they lost a neighbor who was very close to her daughter. You know, some golden boy in the army. And
sorry, I'm sorry. There's been Azakot all over and she didn't know what to do. Okay.
If you
just
have to
lying on
go,
the ground.
please don't
No,
hesitate.
I don't need to go. It's my oldest. I just told her she has to stay where she is and not move and not go anywhere. It's fine. Okay. So the idea that the idea of, yes, I want to be like everybody else is something that comes from the external response of our non-Jewish our non-Jewish peers, right, that say to us, "Oh, why are you a Jew?" And trying to like point us out as being different, and therefore we don't want to be different. But the truth is, I'm going to see it. There's a beautiful story at the end of the book. I don't want to give it away, but there's a beautiful story that Rabbi Sachs brings at the end of the book, where he basically turns around and says, "If we wear our Jewish pride as a badge of honor, others will honor us." Okay, so it's very important. Joanna, and then Michelle.
I just wanted to quickly say how proud we always are when the Nobel Prize winner is Jewish, and or some champion at the Olympics or something like, wow, he's an Israeli, wow, he's Jewish, he's one of us. We claim him as our own. That's a
100%, and therefore, and we're going to talk about this as we go, because I think there's something really, really, I actually think that this moment that we're going through, however tragic, and we know it's like been unbearably tragic, and it still is. This morning we woke up to 4 more beautiful soldiers who have died, and we've all been through the most tumultuous year that we could possibly imagine. But I do believe that something's shifting. And I think that the shift here is, and this is why to me the book's so important to read at this moment, because the shift here is calling us to tap back in to that Jewish pride and to say, despite the fact that the world may hate us, there's something that we should be wearing as a badge of honor. Okay, Michelle, you wanted to add?
Just one idea. I just remember, this is way before October 7th, but I had a conversation with a group of young adults, and they were talking about how Judaism is just ancestral trauma. That's what it's all about. There's just all this trauma from the past over and over and over again, and it's just passed down, all this ancestral trauma. And that's like it's a catchphrase now. And I listened to it for a while, and then we challenged them. Like, what about the ancestral gifts? So you're only looking at one half of the equation. You really just, yes, that's there. There's ancestral trauma, but there's also the ancestral gifts. And how can you appreciate what you've been passed? You've been passed all the negative stuff, but you've also been passed some incredible treasures that you can't ignore.
100%. Again, we're going to talk that one of the chapters in the book is called Triumphing Tragedy. And I think that one of the gifts of the Jews is the ability, Dafka, to somehow integrate trauma and turn it around. I'm going to talk about that, as you said, why just focus on the negative? Let's also focus on the positive. And that's one of Rabbi Sachs's philosophy, very much, is this idea of being passive to becoming active, of kind of being a victim to taking agency. So we're going to talk about all of those things. Chaya.
Chaya hasn't turned on her speaker.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, here it goes. I think also as young people, especially teenagers, I think we cannot overlook the fact of the challenge of being different. When everybody's going out for some food at some restaurant and you say, I can't, that lack of belonging for peer pressure as a teenager, if you don't have the strong Jewish identity, I think that creates a personal crisis. Okay, we have all been young adults, been to college. I know my first experience really outside of the Jewish world was there, and I never felt so different in my whole life. Okay.
100%. So I think all of these things are going to be very formative for us and understand, or kind of, they're going to help us understand this book. At the end of the prologue, and I'm just going to finish with this, okay? So Rabbi Sachs, he then brings obviously all of these other people, and he says, why do we focus on the negative rather than the positive? What is it about the ambivalence of defining our Jewish identity as something positive? And he says that in no small measure, what it is to be a Jew, to inherit a faith from those who came before us, to live it and to hand it on to those who will come after us. To be a Jew is to be a link in the chain of generations. But there are times when the chain begins to break, when the continuity of Judaism and the Jewish people can no longer be taken for granted. Okay, and this is going to be really important for Rabbi Sachs in this book, is this idea of Jewish continuity. That's also one of the things he's addressing. Then he continues and he says, more than 3,000 years ago, Moses made a request that is echoed down the ages. Speaking to the Israelites who were about to enter the land, he said, you shall teach these things to your children, speaking of them when you are at home, on the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Moses was the leader of the small and injured people. They had been slaves, now they were free. They had set out on a long and tortuous journey through the desert, and they had not yet reached their destination. They were not a people to inspire confidence. They were quarrelsome, ungrateful, and decisive, and at times disloyal. Yet Moses sensed that something great had happened to them. He believed, he knew this people would be the carriers of eternal message, one that would have an effect not only on itself, but on the civilizations of the world. But only if successive generations of Jews took it upon themselves to hand down their beliefs to their children and their grandchildren. And then he continues and he says at the end, he said, all we can do now, okay, he said, we can't deprive our children anymore of their choices, right? We're living in a modern world, okay? But what we can do is we can show them what we believe and let them see the beauty of how we live. Okay? I cannot tell my children or grandchildren what they should be, only that they can make that choice, and I wish them blessing in whatever they decide. But I can tell them where we came from, where our ancestors were traveling to, and why it was important to them that their children should carry on this journey. This is our story, unfinished yet, and there is a chapter only they can write. And with this, I want to finish, and I want to say that this book, under the writing, you're going to begin to read it, and I hope those of you that are going to sign on to the course, please already purchase the book and begin reading. At least read chapters, the preface, the prologue, and chapters 1 and 2, at least. And if you can do more, then even better. Okay? But I want to say one thing about this book. While you're reading it, it's beautiful. It's well written. It's the first of Rabbi Sacks's book that is really written for a lay person and not for kind of more of an intellectual, engaged, intellectually, educated. I mean, it is for someone who's educated, obviously, but it's written in the language that can be read on many different levels. It can be read on a very basic level as a nice story about why to be a Jew. What we're going to do in this class is we're going to read it on that level, but we're also going to read it on a deeper level, because we are going to be engaging with the book and trying to understand what underpins Rabbi Sacks's arguments. Two major things are going to underpin them. Number one is going to be the question of identity. From a philosophical perspective, what does it mean to choose my identity? What does it mean to be given an identity? And why today is that even an important question? And the other big question, so I should say three things it addresses. The second question is the idea of the problem of evil, which is a huge part of the book. You'll see as you go on why. And why does that dilemma of the problem of evil sit at the heart of the Jewish mission for Rabbi Sacks? Okay, and it connects the idea of responsibility. And the third thing is going to be, as I said before, the philosophical and sociological question of the individual and the collective. Okay, the rights, the privileges, the needs, the choices of the individual versus the common good, the collective, what comes before me, the story that comes before me, the story that comes after me, and how those two things intersect with each other, at times contradict each other, and why Judaism stands in some senses in the intersection between these two value systems, the value of individualism and the value of collectivism. So I would say that those are the three main kind of underpinning, the main philosophical questions that underpin the book. Have them in your mind as you read through. We're going to be addressing them. What I have done is on the WhatsApp group, those of you that are on the group, great. Those of you that are not on the group and still are not sure they want to sign up, you're going to have to make a decision by next week. Once you've made your decision, speak to the Matan office. They will send you a link to the WhatsApp group. Come into the WhatsApp group, because there is where I'm going to send everything that you need. I've already sent it. I'm going to wait a few days and then send it again. I've sent questions for section 1 and 2 of the book. When we come back next time, we're going to talk about the structure of the book. The book is structured in a very specific way, and we're going to try and understand the structure of the book, and then we're going to already jump in to chapter 1 and 2 of the book and start unpacking it. So I look forward to seeing all of you then. In the meantime, stay safe, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Tanya, can you please send, you said you would send the PowerPoint that you had at the beginning onto the link.
Yes,
you didn't send it yet.
I will send the PowerPoint as a PDF on the group. Okay, no problem.
Sure.
And
Take care.
also, you were going to send Rav Josh Berman's article from Macquarie Show.
Well done. I'm going to write both those things down so I don't forget. Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Tanya. Besoro
Take
Tovot. Stay
care.
safe.
Amen, amen.
Thank you
Amen.
so
Bye.
much. Thank you.
Hope your
Bye.
kid's okay.
Thank you.